Hi, everyone. My name is Julian Lawrence, and I'm a senior lecturer in comics and graphic novels at Teesside University. Thank you for inviting me to present at the Provoking Practice Symposium. So themes of practice as research and research for creative practice feature prominently in my work. And I'm just going to share my screen. And again, those themes feature prominently in this presentation that I like to call 21st Century Winter Journey, Exploring Comics, Adaptation, and Community Art Education. So 21st Century Winter Journey is a visual essay that explores the status of community art education in Middlesbrough, UK, and the ways in which making comics impacts communities locally and internationally. And when I say visual essay, I mean to say a comic. And with this comic, I'm asking this question: in what ways do university students experience community when drawing collaborative comics in Middlesbrough, UK? I'll be presenting work in progress for an upcoming chapter in the form of a comic for an edited book called Transversalities, International Perspectives on Art Education. Now, I've been teaching comics and community art education in schools, community centers, and care homes for 17 years to students around the world. And I believe that forms of comics, such as comic strips, comic books, and graphic novels, are recognized worldwide. And it can also be said that artistic practices of making comics and cartooning are transferable to schools, studios, and universities everywhere. What follows is an analysis of the 21st Century Winter Journey project in the form of a visual essay comic that widens conversations in community art education through theories of research-informed teaching, just-in-time teaching, and Paolo Freire's concept of conscientizaçāo, which means awareness. Now, these theories triangulate and locate learning in a community's relational and public spaces. In applying these theories with cartooning practices, a powerful pedagogical tool emerges. When students become researchers and make comics, they negotiate their understandings of community, their identities, and their futures. Now, these observations that I've made are evidenced in the reflections students wrote at the conclusion of the project. By making comics with a national charity, students develop an awareness of their community and the relational spaces that they share with others. What is this all about? Who was involved in the project besides myself? So we had year 2 students in the BA Honors Comics and Graphic Novels program at Teesside University, collaborating with Streetwise Opera, which is actually a national charity that supports people affected by homelessness, and they have a local chapter here in Middlesbrough. And what we were doing was collaboratively developing Streetwise Opera's narrative and adapting their libretto into a graphic novel. We did this in Middlesbrough, UK from November 2019 to November 2020. And I wanted to investigate community art education and comics with university students. So a decade of austerity, though, has eroded government services in Middlesbrough. And I love teaching because, as Alan Thornton wrote, art is an important human experience that, if not taught, would be denied to many. Now, I learned about art in primary school, growing up bilingual in Quebec, Canada, and I developed literacy skills in French and English by reading comics in both languages. So in this way, I suggest that comics are a preponderantly visual language in which text plays a subordinate role. The practice of comics is, technically and financially speaking, available to everyone. Comics can function as a transversal and democratic visual language comprehended around the world. And I say democratic because, as Groenstein points out, the practice is technically and financially speaking available to everyone. So I want the research designed to include ways for students to develop a new awareness of their community through the participatory, democratic, and collaborative nature of making comics. Making comics supports these students as they discover opportunities to express their voices within the community. I link collaboration with Streetwise Opera, a local charity. with national ties as well. I want to observe the ways, quote, that people learn from each other in diverse contexts across relational spaces of learning through the transversal, transmedial, and international language of comics. As Paolo Freire writes in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, conscientizaçāo, or awareness, refers to learning to perceive social, political, and economic contradictions and take action against the oppressive elements of reality. I'm looking, quote, to the potential and possibilities of education as a medium and practice of art making, whereby students learn ways of creating art that moves an audience. Community art education expands the space of learning from the private individual to group classroom collaboration that flows into the community. So Associate Professor of Art Education Pamela Lawton writes, quote, social interaction and cooperation reside at the nexus of social practice art, and community-based art education. And Professor Emeritus of Sociology Richard Butch says that sociologists and urban designers have long observed the importance of public spaces in the cityscape where people could congregate for sociability. Here's how the project began. In November of 2019, Teesside University arranged a meeting with a local charity, and we were introduced to the program coordinator at Streetwise Opera, Flo. At the meeting, Flo explained what Streetwise Opera was about, and the following is from their website. Quote, Streetwise Opera is an award-winning performance arts charity for people affected by homelessness. The people who take part in our workshops create and perform in extraordinary new productions, working alongside exceptional professional artists. So that gave me an on-the-spot idea when Flo said that they were adapting Schubert's opera Winterreise, and I thought this could work in my advanced storytelling class next semester. I asked Flo if they had a libretto, and she replied, yes, we're calling it After Winter. And I suggested that we could adapt the libretto into a graphic novel as a collaborative classroom activity. And then Flo thought that the words and the pictures can help some of our new migrant participants understand the story better. And so I was given a copy of the libretto. And we decided that I would relay messages between Streetwise Opera and my students during the first part of the production process. So a meeting between the class and the Streetwise Opera participants was arranged for sometime in March. So knowledge is situated and collaborative, whereby meaning is constructed through social interaction with culture and community. And that's how the space of learning extends beyond the student's inner experience. So I determined that this first-time collaboration between Teesside University and Streetwise Opera will work best with the year 2 students. They've already completed the foundational knowledge of making comics in year 1. The current crop of first years lack experience, and the third years are really too busy with their final projects. So on January 10th, 2020, I complete the lesson plan that integrates community art education and comics. As a comics-based researcher and educator, I integrate research-informed teaching and professional practices of collective comics making into my teaching. The lesson plan for this Year 2 university course includes 12 weekly lessons that apply professional and artistic practices of making comics, as well as collaboration, research, and adaptation. So I hope this plan works at the time, kind of relying on improvisation and tacit knowledge. So the students weren't initially impressed. They didn't really want to do opera. But after the lecture, one of the students came up to me afterwards, and when they saw the connection with the homeless charity, they were much more enthusiastic. So the class of 20 students is divided into 5 groups of 4. Each group adapts 5 songs, and I will do one of the songs for a total of 26 songs drawn as comics and compiled into a graphic novel. Now, the great thing about this project was that there was one singular character, one main character in the narrative. So the design would have to be incorporated into each student's comic, but they would still be drawing in their own sort of style. So we began with rough sketches and thumbnails based on research. Those roughs are then cleaned up and then the lettering is added. Once that sort of stage is approved, it then goes to rendering in inks and color, and then the students prepare final camera-ready artwork. Now, following each iteration, revisions and feedback were given to students from both Streetwise Opera and myself as their tutor. Now, the 5 groups developed designs for the traveler, the main character in the opera. I emailed the designs to Streetwise Opera for feedback, and they choose number 3. Students proactively track the production by listing song titles next to each other's names on a whiteboard. And in this way, they negotiate group collaboration and narrative continuity. Streetwise Opera knew that they wanted a chorus in the production, but this chorus would be unseen by the traveler. So this raised the question, one of the students brought it up, how do we draw the community? So that was a good question. How do we have this singular character walking lonely, but surrounded by a sort of support group? How is that going to be depicted? That was something we need to think about. By February 2020, a deadly new disease is spreading around the world. And as we get into March, Streetwise Opera was also trying to find ways to integrate the community chorus into their performance. So at our big town hall production launch on March the 7th, 2020, the students and I worked and sang with the performers and other invited guests. We brainstormed ideas such as dressing up the chorus community as trees and other background elements. The students loved participating with Streetwise Opera like this. And the Streetwise Opera staff described the students as, quote, throwing themselves into the task wholeheartedly. The students studied the music, they soaked up the story, and they attended the launch of the production bright-eyed and enthusiastic. Streetwise Opera invites the students to contribute to their blog and donate art for a fundraising campaign. But that disease was getting closer, and by March 13th, 2020, half the class is absent. Students are returning home across the UK and around the world in anticipation of the pandemic lockdown. Now, unbeknownst to us, this is the last time that we would assemble as a physical group in a real life world setting. So I got everyone who was there to push push the tables together so that we could lay out all of our artwork and we could read through the pages and make sure that continuity was being maintained. Absent students emailed their pages to their teammates and I printed them out for display. Now, as one student, Nicole, later reflected, she wrote, "My favorite memory is when we all mapped out our rough comics on a table in the classroom and we were able to reflect and compare songs, coming up with new ideas on the spot." So I was looking at Bobby's pages and I asked Bobby, what are these spheres you've drawn around the traveler? And Bobby explained that I'm showing the chorus as balls of invisible light singing to him. So that gave me an idea. How about this? The traveler gradually understands his place in the community as it evolves from balls of invisible light to a welcoming chorus of people. And everyone thought that this was a good idea. So teaching often requires a tacit knowledge and the capture of just-in-time moments that can be fleeting. So just-in-time teaching links to Bobby's sketch of the chorus, which answers our earlier question, how do we depict the community in the comic? So the Ides of March hit in 2020. COVID-19 spreads across the UK and the world. The country, like everywhere else, goes into lockdown. Streetwise Opera's live production of After Winter in July is canceled. Student well-being and mental health are negatively impacted, and several request extensions until the end of August. Tragically, the global pandemic hit just as we were developing the collaborative comic, and all teaching migrated online. So the value of the life world community and the sharing of space became even more precious. By making comics with a local charity, students developed an awareness of their community and the relational spaces that they shared with others. Sorry, I'm just going to go back here for a sec. Students also expanded the space of learning from the private, symbolic individual to group collaborations that flow into the world. So here are just some of the comic art created for the 60-page After Winter graphic novel. So this was published in a small print run of 200 copies and distributed to all the performers and the students, and also available digitally through Teesside and Streetwise Opera's websites. According to the head of program at Streetwise Opera, what started its life as a learning resource has become a precious legacy of the production that never was. So the comic, an actual physical comic book, has now become, as they say, the precious legacy of the production that never was. So coming back to the question that I asked at the beginning, in what ways do university students experience community when drawing collaborative comics in Middlesbrough, UK? What I observed was that they experienced community through singing, through hugging, collaboration, emotional and creative support. However, ongoing national and local lockdowns across the UK and around the world have forced our retreat from, quote, public spaces where people could congregate for sociability. And so the new question is, with increased pressure to socially isolate, to self-isolate, to socially distance and learn online, in what ways will community art education negotiate virtual relationality? So I agree with Noam Chomsky, who said in 2012, quote, since people aren't Martians or robots, direct face-to-face contact is an extremely important part of human life, period. It helps develop self-understanding and the growth of a healthy personality. However, there are plans afoot to turn humans into Martians. As Elon Musk wrote in one of his papers, quote, in effect, if we warm Mars up, it would be quite fun to be on Mars. And that, I suggest, might be community art education's 22nd century winter journey. Thank you for your time.